Cowboy, I came here to marry you. I'm the Apache girl you rescued 20 years back. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. The air was warm, but the wind carried a soft, dry chill that hinted at the approaching evening. Yana, a young Apache girl of just 6 years old, wandered carefully among the rocky hills at the edge of her family's village. She loved exploring the land around her home, feeling the rough stones under her small hands and listening to the distant calls of birds flying above. Her grandmother often told her stories of the desert, stories of courage, wisdom, and the spirits that watched over those who walked the land with respect. Yana took these tales seriously, believing every word, and she always carried a small pouch of herbs and stones her grandmother had given her for protection. That day, Yana had wandered farther than usual. She was looking for a rare flower her grandmother had described in the morning, a flower that only grew in hidden spots along the cliffs and hillsides. She imagined how happy her grandmother would be when she saw it. With each careful step, she felt proud of herself, thinking of the surprise she would give her family. But as she climbed higher, the terrain grew steeper, and the rocks beneath her feet became less stable. Yana paused, looking around. She realized she had gone much farther than she intended. The village, which had been a tiny cluster of clay and stone huts on the horizon, now seemed distant and small. A little shiver ran down her spine, but she quickly shook it off. She told herself she could find her way back. She had walked these hills before, and she knew the paths. As she continued, she heard the soft rustle of leaves behind a small cluster of shrubs. Curiosity piqued. She leaned closer to see if she could spot a lizard or a rabbit. She had always loved watching animals, feeling a connection to them that made the desert seem alive. But this time, the sound didn't match the usual wildlife. The movement startled her. Her small heart beat faster. She took a cautious step back, but it was too late. Yana had lost her footing on the loose rocks, and she slid a few steps down a small slope before catching herself on a sturdy bush. Her hands trembled as she clutched the branches, and she looked around, realizing that she had wandered into a part of the desert that was unfamiliar to her. A sense of worry began to creep in. The sun was getting lower, and shadows stretched long across the ground. She had never been this far from the village alone. Yana's mind raced. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her, about the spirits that guided those who respected the land, and about the dangers that came to those who did not pay attention. She whispered a small prayer to herself, asking for help and guidance. Her voice was barely audible, carried away by the wind, but it gave her a small measure of comfort. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Daniel was riding slowly along a worn trail in the hills. He was a man in his early 30s, tall, with broad shoulders and hands hardened by years of work on the ranch. Daniel had lived in this region for as long as he could remember, and he knew the land like the back of his hand. He loved the quiet mornings, the smell of the desert after the sun rose, and the sense of freedom that came with riding across open space. On that particular evening, he was returning from checking a distant fence line, thinking about the chores he would need to finish before nightfall. His horse moved steadily, its hooves kicking up small clouds of dust, and Daniel hummed softly, enjoying the rhythm of the ride. As he rounded a bend in the trail, he noticed something unusual. A small figure crouched near a cluster of rocks. At first, he thought it might be an animal, perhaps a young deer or a coyote, but then he realized it was a child. Daniel's eyes narrowed in concern. The little girl seemed unsure of herself, looking around as if she were lost. Without hesitation, he guided his horse closer, keeping a careful distance so as not to startle her. "Hey there," he called gently. "Are you okay?" Yana looked up at the sound of the voice. At first she froze, unsure whether to run or to stay, but there was something in Daniel's tone, calm, kind, and steady, that made her feel safe. I'm looking for my home," she said softly. Her small voice was barely audible, but it carried a hint of fear. Daniel dismounted and walked slowly toward her, keeping his hands visible to show he meant no harm. "You're a long way from your village," he said. "Do you want some help getting back?" Yana nodded quickly, relief washing over her. She told him about the flower she had been searching for, and how she had wandered too far while exploring. Daniel listened carefully, offering encouraging words and asking gentle questions to make sure she was okay. He could see that she was tired and nervous, and he made a quick decision. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll take you home." They began the journey back together, Daniel walking beside Ayana as she clutched his hand. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the desert, but the girl's fear slowly began to fade. She looked up at him and asked questions about the land, about the plants and animals they passed, and Daniel answered patiently, pointing out interesting details along the way. Despite the tension from being lost, the walk became a small adventure for her, filled with wonder and learning. Along the path, Daniel noticed a small pouch in her hand. "What's that you've got there?" he asked. Yana held it out, showing him the herbs and stones her grandmother had given her. She explained their meaning, telling him about her family's traditions and the stories of the desert. Daniel listened with interest, impressed by her knowledge and respect for the land. He could see that even at such a young age, she had a quiet strength, a curiosity that set her apart from other children he had known. Finally, after what felt like hours to Ayana but only a short time to Daniel, the village came into view. The small huts glowed warmly in the fading sunlight, and the sounds of evening, dogs barking softly, women calling out to children, and the low murmur of conversation filled the air. Jana's face lit up with joy and relief. She ran ahead, turning back briefly to wave at Daniel. "Thank you," she called. "Thank you for helping me." Daniel smiled, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. "Take care of yourself," he said. "And remember, the desert is beautiful, but it can be tricky. Always pay attention to the land and you'll be fine." Jana ran to her grandmother, who hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. The village elders, who had heard about the little girl wandering too far, came forward to offer gratitude to Daniel when he arrived at the edge of the village. He nodded humbly, telling them it was nothing, but the truth was, he had felt a connection with the brave little girl that would stay with him. That evening, as Daniel rode back to his ranch, he couldn't stop thinking about Ayana. She had been fearless yet careful, curious yet respectful, a combination that was rare, even in adults. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this encounter would leave a mark on both of their lives, a memory that time could not erase. For Ayana, the day had been frightening and exhausting, but it had also been magical in its own way. She had learned about courage, trust, and the kindness of a stranger who had appeared just when she needed help. Years later, both would remember this day vividly, not just as a moment of rescue, but as the beginning of a story neither of them could yet imagine. A story that would quietly wait, hidden among the windswept hills and golden sands, ready to return when the time was right. After that summer evening, life for Ayana changed quietly but deeply. The memory of the tall cowboy who had helped her that day stayed in her mind, though at the time, she didn't fully understand why. She returned home with a new sense of caution, always keeping an eye on the paths she walked and listening more carefully to the sounds of the desert. Her grandmother noticed the change. Gianna had grown a little more serious, a little more thoughtful, as if the land itself had spoken to her during that brief, unforgettable adventure. In the years that followed, Ayana continued to explore, but never again wandered so far alone. She kept her grandmother's words in her heart. "The world is beautiful, but respect it, and it will respect you. Be brave, but be careful." School became an important part of her life. Though her family had moved a little closer to the town for better access to education, Ayana never forgot the hills and cliffs where she had once almost gotten lost. At night she would dream of the golden desert, of the wildflowers hidden in its cracks, and sometimes of the man who had reached out his hand to guide her safely home. Daniel, too, returned to his everyday life after the rescue. He kept his routine, riding the hills and tending his animals, but the little girl's bright eyes and quiet bravery lingered in his memory. He often thought of how small and fragile she had seemed, and yet how brave she had been to explore on her own. He wondered what became of her, imagining her growing up with the same curiosity and love for the land. Sometimes he would find himself glancing toward the horizon, half expecting to see her little figure wandering along the cliffs. Life was busy, but the memory stayed quiet and warm in his heart. Time passed. Seasons changed. Years moved by like the wind across the desert, carrying seeds and sand alike. Gianna grew taller, stronger, and more confident. Her curiosity never left her. She spent hours reading books her teachers recommended and books she borrowed from the local library. She loved stories of the world beyond her village, stories about people who had overcome challenges, stories about courage, kindness, and friendship. Yet no matter how far she traveled in her imagination, she always returned in thought to the desert and the man who had saved her. Her family moved to Phoenix when she was 12. It was a larger city, with tall buildings, busy streets, and endless noise. At first, Ayana felt out of place. The desert, the quiet nights, and the open sky were gone. She missed the hills, the wind, the smell of dry earth after a summer rain, but gradually she adjusted. She made friends, learned new things, and discovered that her love for learning could take her anywhere. Yet, in quiet moments, she would close her eyes and picture the golden light of the desert evening, the rocks under her feet, and the hand that had guided her home. In high school, Ayana's curiosity expanded beyond books. She became interested in helping others. She joined community programs, volunteered at local clinics, and discovered that she had a special way of comforting people. Her natural empathy made her stand out among her classmates, and she realized she wanted to pursue a career where she could care for others. Yet, even as her life became full of schoolwork, friends, and activities, the memory of the desert and the cowboy remained a quiet companion. She would sometimes sketch the hills, the cliffs, and the trail she had walked with him, trying to capture the feelings of that evening in colors and lines. Daniel, meanwhile, continued his life in the small town. He worked hard, maintained his ranch, and became known as someone reliable and kind. People respected him, not just for his skills, but for the way he treated everyone around him. Yet, in quiet moments, he would think of Ayana. He remembered her small hand in his, her brave eyes looking up at him, and the way she had trusted him without hesitation. The memory brought a gentle smile to his face, even years later. He wondered where she had gone, what kind of life she was living, and whether she had grown up happy and safe. The years rolled on, and Ayana graduated from high school with honors. She was proud of herself, proud of how far she had come, and she knew that the lessons from her childhood, the courage, curiosity, and respect for the world, had guided her every step. She enrolled in nursing school, determined to follow a path that allowed her to help others, just as Daniel had helped her. Her work was demanding, but she loved it. Each day, she met people who needed care, and each day, she felt the same quiet satisfaction she had felt when she had walked the hills safely in the evening sun. Even as she built a life far from the desert, the memory of that day never left her. Sometimes, when she felt overwhelmed or uncertain, she would close her eyes and imagine the warm light of the sunset, the crunch of the rocks beneath her feet, and the calm voice of the man who had guided her. It gave her strength and reminded her that kindness and courage could change a life forever. By the time she finished nursing school, Ayana had grown into a confident young woman, full of ambition and compassion. Yet the memory of that golden desert evening remained a part of her, quietly shaping her decisions, her dreams, and her understanding of the world. She realized that her gratitude toward Daniel had never been ordinary. It was more than thankfulness. It was a recognition of a moment in life that had altered her path forever. The memory of his calm voice, his gentle hand, and his presence in that dangerous yet magical moment had stayed with her, a quiet flame that refused to fade. One evening, as Ayana was organizing her life for the next chapter, she felt a sudden, clear thought. She wanted to see him again. Not just to thank him, but to know the man who had left such an indelible mark on her heart. She wondered if he remembered her, if he even thought of that evening, and whether he had imagined her as she had imagined him all these years. She realized that this desire was stronger than a passing curiosity. It was a need to reconnect with the part of her past that had been so important, the part that had taught her courage, trust, and hope. At the same time, Daniel's life had settled into a quiet rhythm. He continued his work on the ranch, visiting town for supplies and community events. He enjoyed the simplicity of his routine, the beauty of the land he loved, and the small moments of connection with the people around him. Yet whenever he had a quiet evening alone, he found himself thinking of Ayana. The memory of her bravery, the way she had trusted him so completely, and the sense of hope she had carried, even in a scary situation, came to him unexpectedly. It was not a longing in the usual sense, but a recognition of a connection that had been rare and meaningful. As the years continued, both of them lived lives full of experiences, challenges, and growth. Yet the threads of that one evening, the hand offered in trust, the courage shown in the face of fear, the kindness that bridged the gap between strangers, remained in their hearts. It was a memory neither could forget, a seed quietly growing into something they did not yet fully understand. Gianna often told herself that she might never see Daniel again, that perhaps the memory would remain just a memory, beautiful and important, but separate from her adult life. Yet, she could not shake the feeling that the story was not yet complete. The thought of the man who had helped her that day, and the gratitude and admiration she felt for him, quietly shaped her choices and gave her courage to move forward in her own life. And so, even as the world changed around them, and both Ayana and Daniel walked separate paths for years, that summer evening in the desert remained a quiet, shining memory. Ayana learned that courage, kindness, and trust could have effects far beyond the moment, shaping the future in ways she could not yet imagine. Daniel learned that small acts of compassion could resonate far longer than a single day, touching lives in ways that could never be measured. The memory waited quietly, like the desert sun behind the mountains, for the moment when their paths might cross again, ready to remind them both of the bond that had been formed 20 years ago in the golden light of a summer evening. Years passed, and Ayana grew into a strong, independent woman. She had finished her studies in nursing and had begun working at a busy hospital in Phoenix. She had friends, colleagues, and a life that many would admire. Yet something from her childhood never left her heart, the memory of the desert, the golden hills, and the man who had saved her life. She often thought of him quietly, wondering where he was, what he was doing, and whether he ever remembered the small girl he had helped on that summer day. It was during one quiet evening at the hospital, after finishing a long shift, that the thought struck her with unusual clarity. She realized that she wanted to see him again. She did not just want to remember him in her mind. She wanted to meet him, to speak to him, and perhaps to show him how much that moment had meant to her. The desire was not sudden. It had been growing quietly for years, but now it became urgent, impossible to ignore. She could no longer keep it as a simple memory. She needed to find the man who had unknowingly changed her life. Ayana began to plan carefully. She knew that finding someone in a small town might take time, but she also knew that people in close communities remembered each other. She started by asking friends of friends, looking through online public records, and reaching out to anyone who might know someone named Daniel who lived in the region where she had grown up. The process was slow and sometimes discouraging. There were a few false leads, a few names that seemed promising but turned out to be wrong, and times when she questioned whether it was worth continuing. But every time she felt doubt, she remembered the evening in the desert, the warmth of his hand, the calmness of his voice, the way he had made her feel safe when she had been so scared. That memory gave her courage. She knew she could not stop now. After weeks of searching, she finally found a clue. A local rancher in the town she remembered mentioned a man named Daniel who lived on a ranch at the edge of the hills. The description fit perfectly: the same age range, the same love for the land, and the same quiet reputation of kindness. Ayana's heart raced. Could it really be him? She felt a mix of excitement, nervousness, and hope. She knew that she could not waste any more time. She needed to go and see him. The journey was long. Ayana packed her small bag carefully, including a few items that reminded her of her childhood. The little pouch her grandmother had given her, a sketch of the hills, and a small notebook filled with memories she had written over the years. She wanted to carry not just herself, but pieces of the past that had shaped her. She drove through winding desert roads, past golden fields and rocky cliffs, feeling the wind against the car window and thinking of the hills she had once explored. The closer she got to the town, the stronger the mixture of emotions became: anticipation, fear, excitement, and a strange sense of destiny. When she arrived at the town, it was quiet, almost peaceful. The streets were lined with small houses and local shops, and the hills rose in the distance, golden in the late afternoon sun. Ayana could see the familiar shapes of the cliffs, and she felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. She remembered how small and scared she had felt as a child, and how he had given her courage without even realizing it. Now, she was returning not as a frightened girl, but as a young woman ready to face whatever awaited her. She found the ranch after asking a few locals. It was a modest place, with wide fields, a few grazing horses, and a simple wooden house surrounded by fences. Ayana's heart pounded in her chest. She parked the car at the edge of the property, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The desert air was warm and dry, carrying the smell of grass and earth. She walked slowly toward the house, unsure of what to expect, but certain of one thing. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that might finally bring closure to a memory she had carried for 20 years. Daniel was in the yard, repairing a fence with his usual calm focus. He looked up as he heard footsteps, and for a moment he could see a woman walking toward him. She was tall, confident, and moving with purpose. Daniel's first instinct was to greet her politely, assuming she was a visitor or a neighbor, but as she came closer, there was something in her eyes, something familiar, something that made him stop and stare. She paused a few steps away, taking a deep breath. "Hello," she said softly. Her voice was steady yet carried a hint of emotion. Daniel nodded politely, unsure of what to say. The woman hesitated for a moment and then continued. I think you might remember me. My name is Ayana. I'm the little girl you helped in the desert 20 years ago." Daniel froze. The words sank in slowly, and memories began to surface. Memories of a small, frightened girl, her hand in his, the golden hills, and the warm evening sun. He felt a mix of disbelief, surprise, and recognition. Could it really be her? He looked carefully at her face, at the bright eyes and determined expression, and the realization hit him fully. "Yana?" he asked, his voice low and filled with wonder. She nodded. "Yes, it's me. I wanted to find you. I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to see you again." Daniel took a step closer, still trying to process the moment. He could hardly believe that the little girl he had helped had grown into this confident, strong woman. He smiled, feeling a warmth he had not expected. I remember you," he said finally. "I've thought about that day many times, wondering how you were doing." Yana felt a mixture of relief and joy. The moment had been imagined so many times in her mind, but now it was real. She could see the same kindness and calmness in him that had made her feel safe as a child. They began to talk, first carefully, asking about each other's lives. She told him about moving to the city, about her studies, and about becoming a nurse. He shared his life on the ranch, his work, and the quiet routines he had followed over the years. Every detail, every word, seemed to deepen the connection that had begun so long ago. As they spoke, Daniel noticed how thoughtful and intelligent she had become. She carried herself with confidence, yet there was a softness in her eyes, a kindness that reminded him of the little girl he had helped. Yana, in turn, noticed the same steady calm and gentle strength she had remembered, the same presence that had made her feel safe in the desert. They laughed together over small stories from the past, shared memories of the land, and discovered that the bond they had formed years ago had never truly disappeared. The conversation grew longer as the evening light softened. Yana felt a strange mixture of nervousness and happiness. She realized that the desire to see him again was stronger than she had imagined. It was not only gratitude, it was admiration, respect, and something that had quietly grown in her heart over the years. Daniel, too, felt something unexpected, a deep appreciation for the woman she had become, and a sense that this reunion was more than coincidence. As the sun began to set, painting the hills in gold and pink, Ayana felt a surge of courage. She took a deep breath and spoke carefully yet honestly. "Daniel, I wanted to see you not just to thank you. I think I've carried this moment with me for 20 years. And I realize that I care for you more than I ever imagined." Daniel looked at her in surprise, and for a moment, silence filled the space between them. Then he smiled softly, placing a hand on her shoulder gently. "Yana, I've remembered you all these years. And now, seeing you again, I feel the same connection. I can't explain it fully, but it's there. I understand." The golden light of the sunset bathed them both, and for a moment the world seemed still. The desert hills, the quiet ranch, and the open sky around them felt like witnesses to a bond that had survived decades. Iana realized that the journey had been worth every moment, the searching, the waiting, the hope. And Daniel understood that the little act of kindness so long ago had created a story far greater than he had imagined. They spent the rest of the evening walking around the ranch, talking, laughing, and reconnecting. Each step felt like a continuation of a story that had begun 20 years ago, a story that was now ready to grow into something new. Yana knew that the memory of the desert, the hills, and the rescue would always be a part of her, but now it had become real in the present, alive in the form of the man who had changed her life. As night fell, they sat on the porch of the ranch house, looking at the stars. Yana felt a sense of peace, joy, and anticipation for the future. She realized that sometimes, life's most important moments are quietly waiting, like seeds in the desert sand, ready to grow when the time is right. And now, 20 years later, the seed had grown into something real, something strong, and something beautiful. The morning after their reunion, Ayana woke early, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had spent the previous evening walking around the ranch, talking with Daniel, and laughing at stories from the past. Every moment had felt like a bridge between the years they had spent apart. She had remembered him as the kind, calm man who had guided her safely home when she was a little girl. But now she was seeing him as an adult, strong, steady, and still quietly warm. The realization that the connection they had shared 20 years ago had endured left her with a strange and wonderful feeling, hope. She stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air. The sun was rising over the hills, casting soft, golden light across the ranch. Horses grazed quietly in the fields, and the distant mountains were bathed in pink and orange hues. Everything looked peaceful, yet to Ayana, the morning felt charged with possibility. Today would be the day they truly got to know each other as adults. Yesterday had been magical, but she knew that a real connection required understanding, honesty, and time. Daniel had already started his morning chores when she came out. He greeted her with a calm smile, the same gentle warmth that had drawn her in the night before. "Morning," he said simply. "Sleep well," she nodded, feeling a little shy but also eager. "Yes, very well, the stars, they were beautiful last night." Daniel's smile widened. "They are always beautiful out here," he said, motioning toward the open sky. "But last night, I think they were even brighter because of good company." Yana laughed softly, feeling the comfort of his presence. They spent the morning walking through the ranch, checking fences and feeding the animals together. At first, their conversation was light, about daily chores, the land, and simple routines, but gradually it became more personal. Yana shared stories from her life in Phoenix, about her studies, her work at the hospital, and the challenges she had faced. Daniel listened carefully, genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions and offering gentle encouragement. His calm attention made her feel safe, as if she could share anything without judgment. In turn, Daniel opened up about his life on the ranch, his love for the land, and the quiet moments he had cherished over the years. He spoke about the routines he had followed, the animals he had cared for, and the solitude that had sometimes felt heavy but also comforting. Yana noticed how deeply connected he was to the land, how his hands bore the marks of work and care, and how his eyes reflected a patience and strength that had only grown with time. She realized that this man, the same man who had rescued her 20 years ago, was someone she admired not just for what he had done for her as a child, but for who he had become. As the day went on, they took breaks under the shade of a large oak tree near the edge of the field. The sun was warm on their faces, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of dry grass and earth. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the horses graze and listening to the distant calls of birds. Then Ayana spoke, her voice quiet but filled with emotion. "Daniel, I think I've carried that day with me all these years, more than I realized. And now, being here, seeing you again, I understand that it wasn't just gratitude I felt. It was something deeper." Daniel looked at her, his expression soft and understanding. He reached out and placed a hand gently over hers. "Yana, I've thought about you many times. That day, you were brave, even though you were small and scared. And now, seeing you, I see that bravery has never left you. I feel the same connection I felt that day." Something quiet but very real. They spent the afternoon exploring the ranch together, sharing laughter and small discoveries. Yana showed Daniel the sketches she had made over the years, drawings of the hills, the flowers she had once searched for, and the little paths she had walked. Daniel admired each drawing, fascinated by the detail and care she had put into them. "You've always had a gift," he said. "You remember the land as if it's part of you." Yana smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that their shared love for the land had always been a bond between them, even before she had understood it herself. As the day moved toward evening, they returned to the porch of the house, sitting side by side and watching the sky turn shades of pink, orange, and purple. The conversation became more personal, more heartfelt. Yana shared her hopes, her dreams, and even her fears. She spoke about the challenges of growing up, of moving to a new city, and of finding her place in the world. Daniel listened quietly, occasionally nodding, his hand resting lightly on hers, offering silent support. At one point, Yana looked into Daniel's eyes and asked softly, "Did you ever think about me over the years?" Daniel smiled, a mixture of surprise and warmth in his expression. "I did," he said honestly. "I often wondered how you were doing, whether you were happy, whether life was treating you well. I never forgot that day or you." The words struck her deeply. She realized that the bond they had formed as child and rescuer had transformed into something far more meaningful, something that connected their hearts across time and distance. The evening brought a gentle calm. They prepared a simple meal together, sharing stories, jokes, and small details about life they had never shared with anyone else. The ranch, quiet and peaceful, seemed to embrace them in its warmth. Iana felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced in the city. Here, with Daniel in the golden light of the hills, she felt safe, seen, and understood. After dinner, they walked to a small hill near the edge of the property to watch the stars. The night sky stretched endlessly above them, dotted with brilliant points of light. Iana felt a deep sense of awe, remembering the desert nights of her childhood, the prayers she had whispered when she was lost, and the hand that had guided her home. Now that hand was still there, steady, kind, and strong, and she realized that the connection they shared had been waiting quietly, ready to bloom. Daniel spoke softly, almost to himself. "It's strange, isn't it? How life brings people together in unexpected ways. I never imagined that a small act could lead to this moment." Iana nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I've thought about it every year," she said. "And now, being here, I understand that this isn't just about that day. It's about us, our connection, and the life we can share from here." They sat together in silence for a long while, letting the stars and the gentle night wind carry their thoughts. Iana felt her heart opening, her trust deepening, and her admiration for Daniel growing stronger. She realized that love, in its quietest form, often began with acts of kindness, courage, and trust, qualities Daniel had shown her long before she understood what love truly was. As the night grew darker, Daniel took a deep breath. "Iana, I don't know what the future holds, but I know that seeing you again, getting to know you, it feels right. Like this connection was always meant to exist." Iana smiled, feeling a joy that was both thrilling and comforting. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I've carried this with me for so long, and now I know it's real." The days that followed became a time of gentle discovery. They spent mornings and afternoons working on the ranch together, sharing stories of their pasts, and laughing at the small, ordinary moments that suddenly felt extraordinary. They talked about hopes, dreams, and plans, learning to navigate the new dynamic of being equals in a relationship that had begun in childhood, but had grown into something deeper. Every glance, every shared smile, every quiet moment strengthened the bond between them. Iana realized that life had given her a rare gift, the chance to reconnect with someone who had profoundly shaped her. And Daniel understood that the simple act of helping a little girl had led to something far more meaningful than he could have imagined. The ranch, the hills, and the desert sky seemed to watch over them, as if acknowledging the story that had waited 20 years to unfold. By the end of the week, both of them felt a sense of certainty and peace. They knew that their bond was real, enduring, and built on trust, kindness, and shared memories. Iana felt joy in her heart, realizing that the moment she had waited for all these years had arrived. Daniel felt a deep appreciation for the life that had led him to this connection, understanding that some acts of kindness are seeds that grow quietly, waiting for the right moment to blossom. And so, as they sat together one evening, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson, they both knew that their journey was just beginning. The reunion had not only healed the past, but had also opened the door to a future filled with hope, trust, and love. The story that had started 20 years ago in the golden light of a summer evening had now entered a new chapter, one of possibility, shared dreams, and the quiet joy of hearts reunited. The days after their reunion flowed gently, filled with laughter, conversation, and quiet. Moments that deepened the connection between Daniel and Iana. Every morning they would walk together through the ranch, checking fences, feeding animals, and exploring the familiar hills. Each task, simple as it seemed, became a shared experience, a way to reconnect with the land and with each other. The ranch, once only Daniel's world, now felt like a place that belonged to both of them. Iana often reflected on how much had changed in her life. She had grown up far from this place, learned new skills, and faced challenges that had shaped her into a strong and independent woman. Yet, despite all the years and distance, she realized that some things, some connections, never fade. The memory of being rescued as a little girl had quietly guided her choices, taught her courage, and showed her the power of kindness. Now, seeing Daniel each day, she understood how deeply that moment had shaped both their lives. Daniel, too, noticed the change in himself. He had always been grounded, practical, and careful with his emotions, but Ayana's presence brought a new warmth to his life. Her laughter, curiosity, and thoughtfulness filled spaces he didn't even know had been empty. He found himself looking forward to their mornings together, to their conversations about life, and to the quiet, simple moments that had always carried a sense of peace and connection. He realized that the bond formed decades ago had quietly grown, ready to flourish now in ways he could never have predicted. One afternoon, Ayana suggested they take a walk beyond the usual paths, to a hidden grove she had discovered on her childhood exploration. The sun was bright but soft, filtering through the tall trees that stood like silent guardians. Birds sang in the branches, and the distant hills glowed golden in the light. As they walked, Ayana spoke about her memories of this place, telling Daniel about the small flowers she had found, the herbs her grandmother had taught her to use, and the sense of wonder she had felt as a child discovering the world. Daniel listened with a gentle smile, fascinated by her stories and the vivid way she remembered every detail. When they reached the grove, they sat together on a fallen log, letting the quiet of the forest surround them. Gianna felt a rush of emotion as she looked at Daniel. "I've waited so long for this moment," she said softly, "not just to thank you, but to be here with you, to know you as you are now, and to share my life with you." Daniel reached out, taking her hand in his. "I've felt the same," he said quietly. "Even though the years passed, I never forgot you. And now, I can see the person you've become, the life you've built, and I feel grateful to have you here." The conversation deepened, flowing naturally from memories of the past to hopes for the future. Yana spoke about her dreams, her work as a nurse, and her desire to continue helping people in ways that mattered. Daniel shared his hopes for the ranch, his plans for improving it, and his quiet wish to build a life that was meaningful and connected to the land he loved. Together, they imagined a life that included both their passions, their values, and their shared experiences. The bond that had started as rescue and gratitude had grown into trust, admiration, and love. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and purple, Daniel turned to Ayana with a serious but gentle expression. "Yana, I've been thinking about this. I don't want to just be here with you today or tomorrow. I want a future with you. A life together. I've realized that I don't want to spend another day without seeing where this connection can lead us." Yana's eyes filled with tears of happiness. "Daniel, I feel the same. I've imagined this moment for years, and now that it's here, I know I want to share my life with you too." From that day forward, they began planning the next chapter of their lives together. They spoke with family and friends, sharing the story of how their paths had crossed decades ago and how fate had brought them back together. People marveled at the tale of the Apache girl and the cowboy, at the way a single act of kindness had created a lifelong bond. Yana's grandmother was especially touched, expressing pride and joy that the girl she had raised had found love and connection in such a meaningful way. The preparations for their wedding became a project that reflected both their personalities and values. They chose to hold the ceremony on the very land where their story had begun, the golden hills, the open skies, and the quiet beauty of the desert. They wanted the setting to honor the place where courage, trust, and kindness had first brought them together. Friends and family joined, bringing warmth, laughter, and blessings for the couple. Every detail, from the flowers to the music, was chosen with care, reflecting both their past and their hopes for the future. On the day of the wedding, the desert was bathed in soft sunlight. The air carried the familiar scent of grass and earth, and the gentle wind seemed to carry whispers of the past. Gianna walked through the golden light, her hand in her father's, feeling a mixture of excitement, joy, and calm. Daniel waited at the altar, steady and calm as ever, but his eyes shone with warmth, anticipation, and love. When their eyes met, it felt as if the years of separation melted away, leaving only the bond that had been forming since that long-ago summer evening. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. They exchanged vows that spoke of gratitude, love, trust, and shared dreams. Each word carried weight, reflecting not just the present but the years of experiences, memories, and emotions that had brought them to this moment. As they held hands and promised to walk together through life, the golden hills seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the land itself was celebrating the union of two souls connected by fate. After the ceremony, friends and family gathered for a small celebration. There was laughter, stories, and music that filled the air with joy. Iyanna and Daniel moved through the crowd, sharing smiles, hugs, and moments of connection. Every person could see the happiness radiating from them, the quiet but powerful love that had grown from a single act of kindness decades ago. It was a story that inspired everyone around them, a reminder of the importance of courage, trust, and the enduring power of human connection. In the following weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Yana continued her work as a nurse, bringing compassion and skill to her patients, while Daniel managed the ranch and shared the tasks with her. They supported each other, laughed together, and faced challenges as a team. The ranch, once a place of solitude for Daniel, had become a home for both of them, a place where love, respect, and shared memories flourished. They often revisited the places that had been important in their story. The hills where Iyanna had been rescued, the small grove she had loved as a child, and the paths they had walked together now became places of reflection, laughter, and quiet appreciation. Each visit reminded them of the journey they had taken, the years apart, the memories carried, the search, and finally, the reunion that had led to a life together. Over time, they grew even closer, their bond strengthened by shared experiences and mutual respect. They learned each other's habits, preferences, and quirks, appreciating the small details that made their relationship unique. They spoke openly about their dreams for the future, plans to expand the ranch, travel together, and continue helping others in meaningful ways. Each day brought new moments of joy, discovery, and connection, reminding them both that life's most precious gifts often come quietly, waiting for the right time to unfold. Yana often reflected on how a single moment, the rescue in the desert, had changed her life forever. She realized that courage, trust, and kindness could create ripples that extend far beyond the original act. Daniel felt the same, understanding that a small decision to help someone in need could lead to love, companionship, and a lifetime of shared happiness. They knew that their story was rare, a reminder that life sometimes holds unexpected gifts for those who are open to them. Years later, looking back on that summer evening, both of them would remember it with clarity and gratitude. It was the day their paths first crossed, the moment that had shaped their lives in ways they could never have imagined. But it was also the start of a new journey, a journey filled with love, partnership, and the quiet joy of two hearts finally finding each other. Together, they built a life that honored both their pasts and their hopes for the future. The ranch became a place of warmth, laughter, and shared purpose. They celebrated each year, remembering the day they first met, the reunion that had brought them back together, and the love that had grown from a single, life-changing act. Their story became part of the town's history, a tale of courage, gratitude, and the enduring power of human connection. And so, in the Golden Hills, under the wide desert sky, Iyanna and Daniel found not only love, but a shared life filled with meaning, joy, and endless possibilities. Their story, which began in a moment of kindness, had blossomed into a lifetime of happiness, proving that sometimes the smallest acts can create the greatest miracles.